You know, trying to get a US visa can feel like you're navigating a total maze. And getting a refusal, that can be really confusing and honestly pretty disheartening. But what do those codes on the refusal letter actually mean? Well, today we're going to break down two of the most common ones, 221G and 214B, to give you a much clearer picture of what's going on and what you can do next.
So, picture this. You've handed over all your documents, you've answered every question, and now the consular officer is sliding your passport back across the counter. Your heart is absolutely pounding. This is it, right? The moment of truth. So in the eyes of the US government, what actually happens in that moment?
Once that interview is done, you've basically come to a fork in the road. And while the whole process feels incredibly complex, what happens next is surprisingly simple. It really all comes down to one of two things.
That's it, just two. According to the U.S. Department of State, once your application has been reviewed, there are only two possible outcomes. Not a whole bunch of different options, just two.
So once the interview is over and the decision is made, the officer will either issue you the visa or refuse it. Now, that word, refused, I know, it sounds final, it sounds really scary, but here's the thing, it doesn't always mean what you think it means.
And this is absolutely crucial to understand. A refusal isn't always the end of your journey. A lot of the time, it's just a temporary status. It's a signal that the officer just needs more information, basically putting your application on pause. So let's look at the first big reason this might happen. And that brings us to our first major category, a refusal under Section 221G. The best way to think about this one is not as a denial, but more like the consular officer hitting a pause button on your application. So, in plain English, a 221G just means the officer doesn't have everything they need to make a final decision. You haven't proven you're eligible, yet. But the door is not closed. It just means your case needs a little something extra. But what could they possibly need? Well, a 221G refusal usually boils down to one of two things. On one hand, it could be super straightforward. You're just missing a document or they need some more paperwork. On the other hand, it might require something called administrative processing. All that means is that the officer needs to do some more digging on their end, background checks, things like that. And honestly, how long that takes can really vary from case to case. Now, if they ask you for more documents, you have got to pay attention to the timeline. A clock starts ticking the very same day you get that refusal. You have exactly 1 year to get them the information they asked for. If you miss that deadline, your application is officially closed. You'll have to start the whole thing over from scratch, and yeah, that includes paying a new application fee. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the other really common refusal. This one is a completely different beast. It's a refusal under Section 214B. And this is all about proving your intent, specifically proving your intention to go back to your home country after your trip is over. And this isn't just some vague policy. It comes directly from a letter of the law. Look at that key phrase right there, shall be presumed to be an immigrant. That is the default starting point for every single person applying for a non-immigrant visa. So let's translate that from legalese to English. It means the burden of proof is 100% on you. The law requires the officer to start with the assumption that you're planning to move to the U.S. and stay forever. Your entire job in that very short interview is to convince them that's not your plan. Which brings us to the million-dollar question, right? How on earth do you do that? How do you prove in just a few minutes that you have every intention of returning home? The way you do it is by showing what the State Department calls strong ties to your home country. These are all the parts of your life that tie you to your home. We're talking about real, tangible things. Your job, the house or apartment you live in, your finances, and probably the biggest one, your relationships with your family and friends back home. These are the anchors an officer's looking for as proof that you'll leave the U.S. when you're supposed to. Okay, so you've gotten a refusal, either a 221G or a 214B. Understanding why is step one. But step two is knowing exactly what you should do about it. So let's turn all this information into an action plan. Let's put these side by side so it's super clear. For a 221G, your next step is straightforward. Get them the documents they need within that 1 year window, or just wait for the administrative processing to finish. But for a 214B, well, that's a different story. There's no appeal process. Your only choice is to reapply, and, this is really important, you need to be ready to show new evidence that your situation has changed in a big way since the last time you applied. All right, I know that was a lot of information, from legal stuff to strict timelines. So let's just boil it all down.
What is the absolute bottom line you need to walk away with?
Okay, let's sum it all up. First, and most importantly, a refusal is not always a final no. Don't forget that. Remember, 221G is just a pause, a request for more info. A 214B is all about proving your strong ties back home. The most critical thing you can do is understand which refusal you got, because that's the key that unlocks your very next step.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big thing to think about. We've gone through the mechanics of the system, but it's worth taking a step back. What does it mean to have a system where the starting point, the default assumption, is that you intend to immigrate? How does that affect global travel, business, and opportunity for everyone? It really gets at a fundamental question of how we balance security with connection in our world today.